our viewers from across the globe. This is Focus on Liberia. My name is Dennis Jai. We are broadcasting from Atlanta, Georgia. Tonight, we're going to be discussing on our business and economic forum, politics and economics. Check if you can see yourself in the photo. Law in the photo. We're not even born children there in the photo. Yeah, we were always here in the photo. Yeah. 2005, man, we never left the photo. Now newcomer making more in the photo. Oh, my guest tonight, we have financial analyst, Mr. Alex Chuchu Jones. Alex, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Thank you, Dennis. It's a pleasure to be here.
Joining us again, Mr. Samuel P. Jackson. That's economist Jackson. Mr. Jackson, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Thank you very much, Dennis. It's a pleasure. As usual, I look forward to a spirited conversation, as usual.
Great. And if you are joining us anywhere in the world, this is the Business and Economic Forum. We discuss business, we discuss economics. You know, it's very important to see economics in whatever you do, the economics of it. Sometimes we miss it and we tend to enjoy something else. Take, for instance, holidays in Liberia. We don't really look at the economics of it. We look at a time to stay home. Sports, everything we do, there is an economic factor. So even politics. So tonight we want to discuss politics and economics. Where do they meet? Where do they go apart? And how we can make money from stuff like this. Later on, we're going to be joined by Mr. Dehpue, that's a university lecturer and also economic consultant. We'll also be joined by our West African correspondent, Mr. Edward Amaral, who's going to give us some breaking news from across Africa. And I look forward to a beautiful and exciting show tonight. Gentlemen, once again, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we even start the show tonight on politics and economics, I want us to discuss briefly one of the issues going on, that's dual citizenship. So I want us to comment briefly on the economics of dual citizenship. We understood that the bill is being in the Senate, originated from the Senate, that is being passed, that will go for referendum in 2020. So dual citizenship has some restrictions. They want based on the according to the bill that will pass. But whether restriction or no restriction, let's look at the economics of dual citizenship. Let me start with you, Alex, for this water cooler moment.
Well, the issue of dual citizenship, I think, is a very complex one. My own personal view is that it's one that, you know, has a lot of sentiment. Those who are fortunate to be naturalized U.S. citizens who were born in Liberia strongly believe in it. And those who did not have the opportunity to come to the U.S. and naturalize, they are opposed to it. So it's basically whichever bracket you fall in is wherever issue you're going to take. But I like to take the neutral position. I think there are a lot of economic potentials in terms of allowing Liberians who are born outside the country to have full citizenship.
Can you pump up the volume a little bit?
Okay, so all right, thank you. Yeah, I think those who are born in Liberia but have a U.S. citizenship, I think they should be allowed with some very strict restrictions, meaning they cannot participate at a certain level in politics. And the reason is simple. We've had a pattern of Liberians who go into the country simply for political purposes. Some of them embezzle huge amounts of money, and then they take refuge and sanctuary in the United States. And because they're U.S. citizen, they are not bound by certain laws, or at least you have to go through the diplomatic process. So there should be restrictions, but I think overall, it's an issue that still needs a lot of research to find out what are those restrictions and how it can be done.
When you talk of economic potentials, what are they?
Well, for one, I think Liberians abroad are by and large the largest or the most success economically empowered citizenry I think they can invest in Liberia housing, they can invest in Liberia businesses, they can invest in Liberia institutions. So if you were to create a program where they can come back to Liberia and bring some of the capital, some of the retirement, uh, that would be that would boost the economy by far. So I think yeah, that's some of the economic potential rather than paying all your taxes. And I think the U.S. tax allow people who pay taxes in their birth country, they can write those taxes off. So instead of paying 23% or 25% US taxes, you can pay some of that portion to Liberian government, and then you can that portion can be excluded from the US taxes. So like the British citizens do all the time, and the Israelis do all the time in America. So that will help the economy. Uh, but if it's solely for political purposes, if somebody just wants to be citizen because he wants to run or he wants to be minister, then it defeats the purpose. I don't think.
Okay, Mr. Jackson, I like to see economics in everything. What's the economics of dual citizenship?
Well, first of all, let's look at the structure of dual citizenship, exactly what it means, you know. And I'm taking it from the perspective of those Liberians, who were born in Liberia and because of whatever reason have gone to other countries and have taken up nationality. Personally, I'm opposed to dual citizenship, but I can understand the emotion attached to it. So I'm willing to let it go, but with some restrictions. And I like to see some restrictions where certain positions, in the government, and they can't run for certain offices. But of course, you see the controversy, I mean, the anger and the animosity coming from Liberians in the diaspora who believe that you should get dual citizenship and they should also be able to run for public offices and become ministers in the government. So I often wonder, what is the purpose of them getting dual citizenship? Is it because like things like land rights, voting, passports, and those kind of things. But apparently, I think a vast majority would like to have jobs in the government. I mean, that's the way they've been put, portraying that, and I've seen that because I see this anger and this bitterness against this bill that was passed. I think it's a pretty fair bill in
But
Ghana.
Mr. Jackson, that's
In
the
Ghana.
politics. That's the politics of dual citizenship. What's about the economics?
Oh, I think the economics can be good because this is what I believe. I believe that any government in Liberia that taps into the diaspora for skills and also for investments. See, because Liberians in the diaspora, especially those in the United States, are the most educated, the wealthiest, and in terms of providing skills to the country, I think they can do that. So any government that set up some sort of a structure that provides citizens, in the diaspora with the opportunity to participate in the economy, and will set up a structure that attract their skills, attract the investments. If you go look at Ethiopia, the diaspora bonds are sold by Ethiopian government to finance projects in Ethiopia. If you look at Liberia, $459 million came in war personal remittances last year, for example. So let's assume that we can get another $500 million a year in investments. That would trump any kind of foreign direct investments coming into the country. So I would like to see a coordination of diaspora skills, a database for Liberians with the best skills, like in my own family, lawyers, doctors, engineers, and all kinds of professions. And these people are not interested in coming to Liberia for politics. When people at that level come to Liberia, they're really sacrificing and they want to promote their country. And then again, diaspora investments. If they set up a structure right? And there is trust building that structure where they can attract funding from the diaspora. I think it's a great thing for the country.
Thank you. And I think that's the piece that has been missing in the whole dual citizenship argument is the economics of it. And then the concentration is on the politics of it. The job you can or cannot do. From both sides. We've just been joined by our West African correspondent from Freetown, Sierra Leone, Amara or Edward Amara. Amara, in your country, you have dual citizenship. How is it benefiting Sierra Leone?
In Sierra Leone, we have dual citizenship. It's good, it's nice. It depends on the ground that the person wants to become a dual citizenship. Having said that, we have a lot of Sierra Leoneans who are Sierra, like I am one, I'm a Sierra Leonean, Liberian. Then we have other people who are even dual citizens. They may not be related to the African continent. Some are even American, some are like, since Sierra Leone is a British colonized country, most people are British Sierra Leonean. So it's very good, but it depends. Most of the time, when you have a dual citizenship, when you come to contest for any electionary position here, I think it will be like a climatic situation. People tend to buzilla it anyway, but it's very good. As long as you're a dual citizen, you are not involved into politics. Nobody cares. They think that they are coming for economic development, but immediately you come to join the national politics, you see it, they heighten the situation, try to say anything about you, that you're not a Sierra Leonean, you're this, you're that. But as long as it's not for politics, you're always welcome.
But what are some of the restrictions in Sierra Leone?
There are one of the major things that normally grant people dual citizenship in the first place, like you need to contribute towards the society development positively. Because if you want to become a dual citizen and without renouncing, because becoming a dual citizen means you still hold citizenship to your first country of origin, then coming to Sierra Leone, yeah, like they must see you that you are a peace-friendly person, you contribute to the nation's development, then you do not have any criminal record, they see you, you can be friendly, and you have to go through certain criteria, like under normal circumstances, people must be there to give pieces of evidence to support why you should become a Sierra Leonean, and at the same time hold another citizenship. And you need to go under certain criteria like taking tests, because you must know the history of Sierra Leone, what it entails, how this country.
Can you run for president, vice president? Can you be minister in government? Can you be chief justice?
Yeah, it depends. It depends, because even if you can see the current vice president of Sierra Leone, who is a Fulani, and he's from Guinea, he has deep connection with Guinea. But watching at him, he has contributed towards the development of this country positively. And as long as he was not the head of the political party and having some influence, he's an entrepreneur and thinking about the Sierra Leone. Let me talk about a political situation. Normally, it is being contested on ethnicity. You have the Mendes and you have the Timini. These are the two largest tribes. And because of the full influence from Guinea, they are becoming now huge into numbers. So they decided to influence their way. They watch at things like that. So he contested for the election. Today, he is the vice president of Sierra Leone. He has deep root to Guinea, but yet he's a Sierra Leonean, because even when you trace a lot of Fula history, they emanated from Guinea, they came into Sierra Leone, but they still have some allegiance to Guinea.
My last question to you on that is, we in Liberia, one of the fear is people who are dual citizens can commit crime in Liberia and then go to the other country as a sanctuary. What has been the Sierra Leonean experience on that?
Yeah, but I think, that is perfectly right. Even here, most people who are citizens of other countries, especially when it is continental one, apart from West Africa, like in places like America or Britain, you found most of them, like when they commit crime, they can easily go into Britain, and their country of origin will come on their behalf to protect them. So these are some of the things. That is why before ever they grant you a dual citizenship status, they have to vest your background to know exactly whether you're a good citizen, what are some of your criminal record. If you do not have any criminal record, based on that, they may do it. Like one of the rebel leader in Sierra Leone, Ombrigoli, he also holds a British citizenship. So he was even protected by the law by quoting that he wants to be arrested, because he owned a British citizen. In the first place, he's a British by citizenship first, then later he became Israeli. So some of this protection were there, but at the end of the day, he was persecuted. So these are some of the things that happen. So the fear can be there. People can easily commit crime. If I'm Israeli in Liberia, I can commit crime here, I go to Liberia. But you see, the Interpol security here between Sierra Leone and Liberia within West Africa is not as strong when it comes to continental countries like you talk about Great Britain and America. So these are some of the background events. But they must ensure that they vet your background to ensure that you are not a criminal or you have not been an ex-convict. If you have been an ex-convict, on what did they convict you?
Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you are just joining us, this is Focus on Liberia. Our topic tonight is politics and economics. We were just discussing, as part of our water cooler movement, the economics of dual citizenship. So now let's come back to our topic for today, which is politics and economics. And later on, we're going to be joined by Mr. Dehpue. He's an economic consultant and also lecturer at the University of Liberia. Now, economics is concerned, or I don't want to define. So let me go to you, Mr. Jackson, and just give us a brief summary. When we say politics and economics, what is it that we're talking about, and what is it that we're trying to establish here by this topic, politics and economics?
Well, okay. In economics, we have something called the political economy. And what the political economy basically does is it sets the philosophy behind development, right? Like in the past, you have some people who are Marxists, some people who believe in a mixed economy, and some people who believe in free market, right? Going further, the development philosophy cannot just be about extreme. It has to be about practical matters that promote the well-being of citizens. Okay, let's take the Scandinavian example. I take the Scandinavian example because they are the most developed countries in the world. Norway is the most developed country in the world, and Sweden and Finland and Denmark and those countries. This is what they believe to be their political economy. They believe that they give business and individuals, they give them an enabling environment so they can thrive. So in exchange for that enabling environment to thrive, you have tax. And then we give some of that money back to society in terms of social safety nets and all of that. And I know in the United States, people would say, well, that's communism and that's socialism. But the fact of the matter is there's a lot of social safety nets in the United States of America, and especially coming after the Great Depression, where you have Social Security, where you have Medicaid, and then you have food stamps. You have a lot of safety nets. Americans don't like to talk about it, but you also have to look at the subsidies to farmers. So the political economy has to do with the best philosophy in developing a country, and based upon the objectives of a country. So what is Liberia's political economy? And I wrote, and my book is mostly on the political economy. And this book basically what it does is it gives you a political and economic history of the country. What were some of the things that impacted Liberian the economics of Liberia? Number one, book starts at 1492 because of slavery and discovery of the New World, and the impact of the North Atlantic slave trade on the formation of Liberia. Right? So then the plantation economy in terms of cotton being the fulcrum of the Industrial Revolution. So all of that was transplanted to Liberia, a plantation economy. That is the reason why you see the rubber farms in the country, are basically an approximation of of the plantation in America in the antebellum South.
Okay.
The other part of the political economy is the development philosophy, what they call the supply economics, right, which is a top-down economics. And I've been opposed to the top-down economics in Liberia because it has done nothing to develop indigenous entrepreneurs. If you look at all developed societies started with the creation of indigenous entrepreneurs. In the United States, are mostly farmers, and these farmers, there were economic transformation, and they went into manufacturing, and then we had the post-industrial. So in Great Britain, it was a nation of shopkeepers, okay, and there were also farmers. But Liberia has not really developed an indigenous entrepreneur economy. So the Lebanese, the Fulahs, and the Indians play that role for us.
Right.
They are the shopkeepers. They are the ones that they're the indigenous, for lack of a better word, they are the indigenous entrepreneurs, and we Liberians are basically part of that food chain where we're just consumers and we're
Right.
not participating in the economic growth of our country. And that's why poverty will always be a part of Liberia because we don't have indigenous entrepreneurship in the country.
Thank you. Mr. Jones, political economy, if I can read over somebody's shoulder, is the study of production and trade and their relations with law, custom. First of all, let's look at both. Economic is concerned with studying and influencing the economy. Politics is the theory and practice of influencing people through the exercise of power. So why economics influence economy, politics influence people through power, and those people influence the economy. So the link there between politics and economic is very thick. In Liberia, what do you see?
Well, the first problem is I don't think people understand politics or economics in Liberia. I want to, fortunately, most of Liberians were educated either in the United States or the UK, overwhelming majority, including myself. But what we did not know is that the structure of America is basically entrepreneurial, like Mr. Jackson said. America is basically, essentially a corporation. If you go back to the 1800s, I mean, before even there were the Declaration of Independence, America was the largest exporter of tobacco. People came from Europe to set up plantations, and by the late 20th century, America was the largest exporter. So you cannot talk about politics when I hear a lot of young Liberians or a lot of even the quote unquote veteran politicians. They know nothing about economics, and they think that politics is just about winning elections. And they think that, you know, America runs because of democracy. America runs because of economics. France runs because of economics. Japan, if you look at the G20 nations, for instance, G20 is not based on the level of democracy in your country. It's based on the level of your GDP, your gross domestic product. So the 20 nations with the highest gross domestic products are the ones who are part of the G20 or the G7. So if you want to understand politics in the world as we know it, then you have to go back to 1776, Adam Smith, and where he talked about, you know, the idea of self-preservation and, you know, business entrepreneurship, as Mrs. Jackson just alluded to. So all we're doing around is voting, dividing each other and being poor. Where we really need to focus on, what's the point of government? The point of government is to provide security and create economic well-being. That's the simplest definition of what a government should do. Protect your people and feed them, give them opportunity. So all our politicians, and it's so good that you talk about this show, because when you press our politicians, you know, for answers, none of them can speak intelligently on the economy. And I'm talking about the finest politicians. You talk about people like Bernard Ure. You talk about people like Alexander Cummings. They won't discuss economics. Why? Because most of them have used politics as a means to get into power, not as a means to empower people economically. So that these people don't run businesses in the country. These people don't have investment into the country, but yet they want to be president. So it's unfortunate. Whereas if you look at America, look at all the American Treasury Secretary. Let's go back to uh, most of America, even the current Secretary of the United States. What was he? He was a Hollywood producer. If you go back, Snow was a Wall Street guy. You go back to as far as where Tim Gagner was a head of the Federal Reserve, but most of the American politicians are business people. George Bush owned a baseball team. Okay, George W. Bush. So you can't talk about politics without talking economics, because at the end of the day, you have to feed your people. You have to provide. You're competing against every other country. You look at Singapore. You look at country like Japan. Why you think Japan is so powerful?
Right.
Not because of the military. Or Switzerland. Switzerland does not even participate in any kind of conflict. But Switzerland and Norway and Finland are the most developed countries in the world, because these countries focus on production, productivity. They focus on, you know, they have the highest human index rating of any countries. The people live better, longer, more quality life, more education than any other country, including the United States. So I think our politicians need to first understand why you're in politics. You're in politics just to bring one tribe against another, or one group of people against another, or you're there to create opportunities for people to build manufacturing, to start supplying goods and services to the world. And to answer that question, no, none of our politicians that I've seen have done that so far.
One person who have seen both sides, both economics and politics, is our guest tonight, Mr. Sam Jackson. I believe he's been a politician ever since the days of the progressive movement. Mr. Jackson, politics in Liberia, why is it so different, or why is it so far apart from economics? Why is it that most politicians don't discuss economics? Why is it that we don't, and the focus now, like even today, is mainly on politics and we don't see the economics? Why is that?
Okay. Well, the reason for that is because Liberia is a patronage state. And because it's a patronage state, politics is used to achieve economic benefits. It's not the other way around. The other way around is that somebody exemplifies himself in economics, in the business environment, and then he seeks political office. If you look at the last 16 years of our country's history, people who are living in rented rooms in some of the worst slum communities in the country, they became representatives. And those people, used their political positions to benefit themselves economically. So for the rest of the country, they look at politics as a means for economic aggrandizement, which in most other societies is the other way around, where an individual distinguishes himself, okay, either as a banker, as a farmer, investment banker, as a merchant banker, a real estate developer, or something. In Liberia, most of the people who are running for political offices have never run any business in their lives. They never done a payroll in their lives. They don't know what withholding taxes are. They know nothing about the rudimentary elements of business. That is the reason why you have so much poverty in the country, because it is the political arena that produces economic benefits. It should be the other way around, where you go into the economy and you distinguish yourself, and then your people look at you, and then they can reward you with political offer. But it's totally convoluted, and I call that an inverted pyramid, where the best and the brightest don't rise up in Liberia. It is the completely opposite. The people with the lowest IQ, the people with the least developed brain, the people with the least education, the people with the least understanding of global politics or global economics. These are the people that are sent to positions in Liberia. So how can somebody who doesn't understand the evolution of economic thought, how can you grow an economy if you don't know what the evolution of economic thought is, from Adam Smith, okay, all the way to Gresham, all the way to John Maynard Keynes, and to Amartya Sen. Look, Alice was talking about human development, and in economics, we try to distinguish output, which is the GDP, from human development. Norway is a small country by just about 3 to 4 million people, but it has the highest human development index on the planet. The whole idea of GDP tells only a small part of the story. When a country has a high output, okay, and this whole GDP was begun by a guy called Simon Kuznets to determine output. But output alone is not sufficient to tell a story of development. So some countries with very high GDP have, for example, the United States has a lower human development index than the Scandinavian countries, because I was trying to explain to you earlier that there is a development philosophy among the Scandinavian countries that if you do extremely well, you have an obligation to pay taxes so we can build social safety nets. And because of that, you see Scandinavian countries have high taxes, but they have low crime, and they have the best educated, the best fed, and also the most educated in terms of, raw education. So for Liberia, I see a total convolution of the political economy, where the people who are our leaders today, yeah, take for example the national legislature. If you're talking about printing $35 billion, where is the research bureau attached to the Committee on Currency and Banking, where a guy like Alex Jones or Sam Jackson can go and sit down in a public hearing and can contribute to that dialogue? It's not existent.
Mr. Jackson and Alex, even the citizens, our minds are not trained to consume such information, right? We don't even look for that. Let's take, for instance, during campaigns, how many of us are concerned about the economic policy of the people that we vote for? So I don't know which one comes first. Is it because politicians are not telling us, or is it because we don't want to know, that economic will eat? Alex, what's your view?
Well, I think this is one subject that me and Mr. Jackson wholeheartedly agree upon. That Clinton said it in few words: "It's the economy is stupid." You cannot even have a democracy. There was a study that was done by Paul Cartier. Paul Cartier is one of the best development economists of today, a British from Cambridge, and he said he did a study and he wrote a book called The Bottom Billion. And it said that any country that falls below a certain threshold of economic development will eventually go into chaos and war. And that's been proven. Look at Somalia, look at Sudan, look at Congo, look at the GDP, and look at the current situation. So most of our economists, to answer your question, most of our economics, I mean our politics today is patronage, as you rightly said. And Liberians are not educated because when they hear the word economics, they think it's about demand, supply, or the curve and the funny thing. But basically, economics is simple. It's just about jobs and about being able to earn a return, to retire comfortably in your country, to be able to send your kids to good school, and to enjoy the fruit of your labor. That's if you just look at economics that way, then it's not threatening. And that's what the developed countries have. That's what Japan has. That's what Singapore has. That's what Norway, Finland, Germany. Look at Germany, for example. Germany was completely destroyed in 1945. Liberia wasn't destroyed. If you look at Germany, Germany was one that lost the war. They had to pay reparations. The whole entire country was destroyed within 10 years' time. From 1945 to 1955, Germany was already back and was one of the largest producers. It started with Volkswagen factory, one factory. By 1965, Germany was a leading economic power. They have paid all the war reparations, and today Germany is the best economy in Europe. It's also you have a high human development index, and so forth. Why? You think it's because of politics? Do you think because no? It's because of economics. They can build things. They know they have good managers. They have a strong uh, 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 relationship with how to run a country in a business manner. So they sell. If you want to buy a car today, what kind of car are you talking about? Mercedes Benz, BMW. Where they come from? They come from Germany with the best engines and the best, equipment come from Germany. You go to Singapore. Singapore was also completely destroyed in 1950. So was Japan. Why these countries today are some of the leading countries in the world, and you have countries in Africa that were never didn't even come that far in terms of level of destruction. So the problem is that you know uh, our politicians are just inept. Most of the people who run Liberia cannot even discuss economic topics because they don't know it. And you can't run a country.
Let me hold you on that because from what I've seen, not that they don't know it, but if you talk about economics, you're not going to win the campaign. I spoke to one candidate who was running to become a representative, like, okay, building roads and doing all that, that's not your job. So why are you promising the people that you're going to build their roads, you're going to build school? Is that Dennis? We know that. But if you went to a village to run campaign and you tell them you're going to make laws, nobody's going to vote for you. So are we our own problem, Mr. Jackson? I know you have engaged, you have run campaign before. You don't talk about economics when you go to run your campaign because you want the vote. Yeah. So in essence, because politics is the, if I can give a basic definition, is the act of influencing people to believe even what you yourself don't believe.
Yeah. Okay. But I've run two campaigns. Okay. In 1997, I ran a campaign for Ellen Sirleaf, and I believe at that time that she was the best hope for economic development in terms of reconstruction for Liberia. And then, of course, and then in 2005, and I was proved right. But then, of course, Ellen was great. Ellen has been greatly hampered by corruption, bad governance, malfeasance, and all kinds of uh, bad things. No, it's very sad that we've always had an opportunity to press the reset button and to go in a totally different direction. The first opportunity we had in my lifetime was in 1980 when the oligarchy was overthrown. And, we had 130 plus years of a one-party state, a patronage state, a country based upon a huge degree of inequality. And it was the hope of most Liberians that in 1980, with the coming to power of grassroots, military men, that they will move along a path of rapid economic development, share prosperity. But unfortunately, because of the the psyche of the nation. They went, into the corruption, into the bad governance, into the undemocratic tenets and all of that. So we are basically, like I always, say in my book, we are victims of our own history. Dennis, I don't know if you know, but Liberia is a country of conflicts. We have had over 132 wars in our nation's history. And people shouldn't think that in 1980, April 22nd was the only time that people have been taken on the beach and they have been executed. In 1915, right, under President Daniel E. Howard, 75 crew chiefs were executed, were hung on the beach, in Sastan, because of the war between the American-Liberian hegemonic government and the natives. And some people believe that the events of April 22nd, when those 13 people were shot, could have been, what should I say, revenge for what happened in 1915. So our country was founded on a false premise. The false premise that you could take free slaves from the United States of America, take them to this place in Africa where they will Christianize heathens, and then they will build a democratic government that will have shared prosperity for generations and generations to come. Liberia in 1822 was the time when the settlers landed on Providence Island. And without building institutions, without setting up structures, with not even having a military and having a real economy, Liberia proclaimed its independence because of the false premise that it wanted to collect custom duty from British and European vessels.
I disagree with that, but go ahead.
But that was why you disagree. It is a fact. No. The Declaration of Independence was made because they had seized a Liberian vessel, and Joseph Jenkins Roberts and the men then they were told that because Liberia is an NGO, it was not a
right
country. It could not exact taxes.
It could not negotiate. It could not negotiate with other countries for any or trade deals. I'm not a historian, but
it was not about trade deals, sir. It was about custom duties. If you look at Charles Henry Hurich, if you look at Harris Johnston, these are books that you can read, and everything here is in my book.
I read some of those books.
Liberia declared independent because it wanted to exact custom duties from the British and the Europeans, and they refused, and they seized a Liberian ship. That Liberian ship was taken to Sierra Leone, and there was a whole back and forth controversy. So it was that time when Joseph Jenkins Roberts and his buddies, when Hillary teased them, they decided to declare independent so there could be a country to start collecting custom duties. That's the reason why. And then remember, but just look at the timeline.
Yeah, let's go back.
Listen to me. I think look the timeline. 1822, 1847. That's what, 25 years. America, 1492, 1776. How many? It was hundreds of years before the 13 colonies came together as a country, right? And they had a standing army. They had an economy. Okay, they had a navy. They had
Mr. Jackson. There were a lot of false starts. There were a lot of false starts. So you were saying,
yeah, but if I can just chime in here, I understand in 1822 you had a mercantile system where large countries with huge military control the economy. But let's go back to 1950 and today. those scenarios are no longer applicable. So yes, in 1822, if even if you had the best economy, um, you could be easily overpowered and you could be all run by a larger country with a larger army. That's what happened in most of Southeast Asia, Russia, and even in Europe, the World War One, World War Two. But so let's look at today. Uh, can any country today come up and have economic prosperity? Uh, yes, my answer would be an emphatic yes. In fact, there are many countries that are much smaller with no previous colonial ties. Today are doing extremely well in terms of from the human development index perspective and from the GDP per capita perspective. They look at a small country like Bermuda. They look at Chile. Let's look at Seychelles in Africa. Rwanda, a country that I like to name. South Korea. Because say these countries were all decimated. These countries all went through imperialism. These countries were all destroyed. What brought this country back to South Korea today is one of the leading G20 nations with one of the strongest economies in the world, and a country as large as Nigeria, for instance, that has a ton of oil with huge, population, and yet there's no competition. And the answer to that is you have to employ current day economic practices. That's the only difference. When Lee Kuan Yew took over after independence in Singapore, what did he do? He had a series of first thing he did was he sent a lot of his young and bright people to London and the U.S. and they studied the U.S. and the London and the United Kingdom's economy, and they saw that those economies were strictly based on entrepreneurship, was strictly based on manufacturing and production and productivity. So what did he go in 1960? Uh, these people didn't even have classroom. They were like Liberia in 1960. They came up with a set of economic plan. One, we're going to provide that every citizen of Singapore will have a home. We'll provide mortgage. We're going to set up few industries. One car manufacturer. The Hyundai you drive today is made in South Korea. Okay, the shipping industry, they started to build ships in South Korea. They started to build cell phones in your Samsung. So I was just reading a few days ago that Rwanda just started building manufacturing cell phone. So we're not going back to 1922, but if we come to today, if a country is not doing well economically, it has nothing to do with imperialism. It has nothing to do with, what happened 100 years ago. What it has to do is what is the interest rate, what's the economic policy, and who is running your economic show. If you go and bring someone like Mr. Jackson just said, who has no entrepreneurial skills, he doesn't even know what a Wall Street Journal is. He can't even distinguish between a bond and a derivatives. He doesn't know that. How is this man going to be able to take a country from the state it's in today to a modern economy when that's the language every other country is speaking? It's right. Impossible.
You mentioned economic policy and economic planning. Let's say every government, either the government in waiting, politician, political parties. I don't know, maybe I'm not reading enough, but I don't see any economic policy, any economic planning being done. So that if for instance, I wish all our politicians could come on this show and talk economics. Most of the time when I hear them, talk, not just people currently in power, but even when you are preparing to be in power, do we look for the economic policies? Do we look for any economic plan? Mr. Jackson, you tell me if you shouldn't have an economic plan before coming to power, or even while you are contesting, what do you need to do to plan economically?
Okay. Let me just handle what my young colleague said about you can't go back to history to make a determination of who you are today. But if you read Asimoglu and Robinson, Why Nations Fail, is the lack of institutions, right? And if you look at Singapore, and you look at Asia, you look at the tradition and the institutions that were built in those countries, and those people came from a very low economic base, but they already had the characteristics like discipline, hard work, honesty. These are things that build nations. These are the intangibles that build nations. Liberia has not been able to go far from its history because it hasn't built institutions. It hasn't built institutions that are trustworthy. It hasn't built a bond and an honesty between its citizens. You know, the American Liberians and the natives. There's this whole distrust and the talks and polls. So all of that contributes to where we are today. So the history of a country is extremely important. You cannot disregard the history of a country for economic development. So now let me just handle the issue of economic planning. The foundation for economic development is output. The centrality of economic growth is what makes an economy. You have to you have to grow something. You have to make something. You have to manufacture something. You have to plant something. And most countries came from an agrarian background. And so from agriculture, there was a transformation into manufacturing. Liberia, there has not been any transformation from agriculture to manufacturing and going to the post-industrial world. Liberia is strictly a plantation economy, and it still is a plantation economy even in 2019. I give you examples. Firestone still has the million plus acres. They have Liberia rubber tappers. You have GVL, it's still a plantation. You have Sim Darby, it's still a plantation. You have Kavala, it's still a plantation. And then the whole economic enclave activity, which is based upon the faulty concession model, was begun in 1870 by E.J. Roy when they tried to give a company called United Minerals Company all of the mineral resources of the country. So the extractive industry and the plantation economy are the two, well, I said, dastardly obstacles to Liberia's economic development.
How do we turn that around now?
Okay, great. But first of all, to turn that around, it has to be with the national psyche. It comes from the head. Development is a head thing. It's just like in your family. You have a wife, you have kids. The way that you structure your home, you have to have a philosophy in raising children. You have to have a philosophy that good education. You have to have a philosophy of good health. You have to have a philosophy of children that are well behaved. It's all part of that. So for a country, you have to have some degree of planning. Okay. A country that fails is because it really did not plan. What has Liberia planned in the last, let's say, since 1944? When people look at it, the open door policy. What did the open door policy do? The open door policy basically was the neoliberal economic construct that says that you attract foreign direct investments and give them a lot of concessions, and they will what? They will create jobs, create income, they will transfer technology, and then you're going to see a nation grow. That doesn't work. What works for most countries on the planet is, I keep telling you, is indigenous entrepreneurs, people who make things with their hands and grow things with their hands. Either you start as farmers and you start processing agricultural products, an agro-based economy where you're making peanut butter, where you're doing milk, where you do make all kinds of agricultural products where you're making cereal, where you're growing rice. Liberia, for example, can't even feed itself. Rice.
Mr. Jackson, let's get one thing clear. When you say indigenous economic, I hope you are not talking about country and conquer people, right?
Of course not. I mean, but when you say in indigenous and people who are native to the country to become entrepreneurs, okay. And I look at the American Liberians as indigenous,
okay,
as in indigenous to Liberia. I'm talking about. So if the American Liberians, who ancestors came hundreds of years ago, if they engage in skills, okay, to become entrepreneurs, to sell something, to grow something, then that kind of country can create wealth. Liberia doesn't create wealth for its people. That's one of the greatest obstacles to our economic development. We don't create millionaires in Liberia. We don't create people who stand out as entrepreneurs. Whereas if you look at the Lebanese, look at the Fulas, and look at the Indians, they stand out as entrepreneurs. And they grow. And they ride the growth curve of the economy. No matter how bad the economy is in Liberia, look at Tottenham Boulevard today. Boulevard Palace Hotel, Royal Hotel, all of those. Alice, I don't know when was the last time you went to Liberia, but Tottenham Boulevard is looking like Rodeo Drive today. Supermarkets. They're having stores that are selling chandeliers. Eat Brothers is selling chandeliers in Liberia. Okay, these people have their own economy, and that economy there is a growing economy, is a productive economy. Whereas
and Mr. Jackson, like I said, I'm not interested in just going to Liberia for the sake of, going to Liberia. I'm a serious person. If there's an opportunity in Liberia or people are serious about doing business, in fact, I don't even have to be there. I think my contribution can be more than helpful. And I do help a lot of young people in Liberia. But you just mentioned Tottenham Boulevard. I grew up in Liberia. I graduated from high school in Liberia. I didn't leave Liberia in 1996. I've been to Africa, Ghana, lived in refugee camp, you name it. But let's look at solutions here. We know the problem. If you talk to any Liberian politician or any Liberian, they will tell you all the problems we have. But what is the solution? How can we turn the page and go to economic development, social and economic development? And that's a $1 billion question.
Right. Thank you.
And that's what I'm interested in. I'm not interested in, people talking about what happened in 1900 or 19. How can Liberians today grow the economy and provide jobs for young people and everybody and build industries? How? And the answer is not coming, unfortunately, from the political leadership. The political leadership themselves, you talk about millionaires. How many Liberian politicians or Liberian ministers were millionaires? Like you said, how many of them has ran a simple business? How many of them can even read a balance sheet or income statement? I would put money on it that most of Liberians who are in politics does not even know the difference between a cash flow statement and a owner's equity statement. Now, if you don't know that, how are you going to lead? These are things you can go to any library. You don't need a PhD in economics to learn. These are things, if you're simply interested in development, you should know, because you should be able to say, all right, we want to set up 5 manufacturing in Liberia. We want to make sure that instead of Rodeo Drive or Tottenham Boulevard look like Beirut, we wanted to look like more of Liberians, that Liberians are owning those chandelier stores, that Liberians are owning the generator stores, that Liberians are operating the farm. How can we do that? Instead of that, we don't hear our politicians talk about that. What they're talking about, let's impeach George Weah. What they're talking about, let's have a strike. So I would really like for Liberian politicians including whether it's the government or the politician, let's sit down and have a real economic dialogue. Let's talk about how we can grow from 0.5%, 0.4% to 2%. Let's talk about how we can get Liberians to control their financial industries. Let's talk about how we can get Liberians, instead of letting Firestone come to Liberia and own thousands of acres of land and treat our people like people in a plantation in America in the 1700s. How can we be the owners of Firestone? Can we be stakeholders and shareholders? That's what I'm interested in.
And good, and I'm interested in that. And we have callers on the line who also are interested in that. Let me bring you on. Caller, your name and where you calling from? Caller 605, your last 4 digits 0641, your name and where you calling from? Okay, let me go on to my next caller. We have another caller on the line. Your name and where you calling from? Oh, sorry, it's my bad. Well, if you just joining us, this is Focus on Liberia. We are broadcasting from Georgia.
Hello.
Yeah,
Hello.
caller, go ahead. Your name and where you calling from?
My name is Dennis. My name is Patrick Soa, and I call you from South Dakota.
Patrick, welcome to Focus on Liberia. And that's the former LU president, right? The student president.
No man, leader. All
right, we forget about
our old history.
Well, you big man, so we say Sao as you come in.
No, man, be asking my man, be asking.
All right, go ahead, Patrick. Yeah. Your question or comment?
Yeah, I'm going to just lay my 2 minutes with a little history, but I agree with now Mr. Jackson, the second speaker.
Alex.
I think, yeah, I agree with him, and I'm in line with him. Now, the Liberian economy has relied heavily on the mining of iron ore prior to the Civil War. Liberia was a major exporter of iron ore on the world market. In the 70s, in the 80s, iron ore mining accounted for more than half of Liberia's export earnings. Since the coup d'etat of 1980, the country's economic growth rate has slowed down because of decline in the demand for iron ore on the world market and political upheavals. Now, like the second caller said, I have often wondered whether Liberia's current political and economic problems are a direct result of lack of vision by our past or present leaders. I have often wondered. Okay. But for example, why is Liberia's fortune so different? Like the second speaker says, from countries like Malaysia, Thailand, South Korea, Ivory Coast, the Ghana, South Africa, whose gross domestic product per capita is adjusted for purchasing power parity. Why is Liberia in the 60s? The question is, why have some of those countries, why have they joined the high income club, countries, while Liberia still remain poor or not developed? Why?
Thank you, Patrick.
Do differences in these countries, macroeconomic policy strategies, and trade policies play any role, in the rise of those countries that they learned from our country, Liberia, have not? These are questions, like the second guy said, questions that come to my mind, but the time is not there, and I would love a day to just give you my own view about, what the guys are saying. But it's something that we wondered about, why countries like
Thank you, Patrick.
Yeah.
And we'll keep in touch so we can.
And Dennis, I'd like to take a crack because those are very good questions.
Yeah, I want to say, is it wish? They wish us or what?
No, there's no voodoo. No, Liberia is the most corrupt country. Those are all nonsense. Okay, China is more corrupt than Liberia. Okay, America is more corrupt than Liberia. Nobody have heard that. The only difference between a country that has a higher income per capita and higher living standard, and I did a study on it, and I think I don't want to pre-think, but I have some books coming up. Is you have to look at one the interest rates of the country, which is the number of banks they have in the country. You have to also look at how many corporations the country have, and I like to use this occasion to also share, some ideas so people not just come here. So let's look at iron ore, for instance. And I think if you're watching the screen, the problem isn't that Liberia is dependent upon iron ore or mining. There are countries that only have no iron ore, no mining, oil. Like for instance, Saudi Arabia is only depending on oil. They don't have a huge agriculture sector. Dubai doesn't rely on any other commodities. The difference between Liberia and most of these countries is we don't own our iron ore. So let's look at Rio Tinto is one of the largest iron ore producer, and I'm sure they have some stake in Liberia. So look, who owns it? Australia, Brazil, Vile, BHP Billington, Australia, okay, Brazil, South Africa. So if you don't own your Lamco, you don't own your company, then what happens is they come into your country and they take all the resources and they pay you pittance. So it's not a question of what sector you go to. Even if you have agriculture, you must own your industry. You must have stakeholder. And I must agree with Mr. Jackson on this one. Liberia has to have a stock exchange. We should have a stock exchange 20 years ago. And so having a stock exchange is not that complicated. A simple Excel spreadsheet, like I make the thing. Even Somalia has a stock exchange. And the reason you have a stock exchange is so you can raise capital, so you can buy shares in these companies. Let's go to another graph here. Let's look at all the American Treasury Secretary. This guy, this beautiful man, Sam Minucci. He's current Trump Secretary of Treasury. He's a businessman. He doesn't have an economic degree. He's not the most scholar in America, but he's someone who has been very successful in creating businesses. He's a multi-millionaire, worth almost $300 million. This guy, Jacob Liu, he works for Citibank now. He used to be a former corporate guy. Let's go this guy, Hank Paulson, CEO of Goldman Sachs, one of the largest investment bank in America. So if you go through the list, this guy, Jon Snow, you cannot, if you want to produce, only an orange tree can produce oranges. You cannot get what somebody does not have. So Liberians need to recruit people who, I'm not advocating for any job, by the way. I don't want to be, I'm a consultant, I'm a businessman, I'm a trader. So I'm not trying to sell myself here to say, but look around you. Look for people who have been very successful business people. Those are the people who should be running your government policy, like America or London or Australia. Look for these people, capitalize the company, bring them together, and create industry. Last chart, I want to create a bring there. So if you go here and look at all the countries in there, let's go to Brazil. Let's look at South America, for instance. And let's look at what the interest rate. So you look at a country, they're paying 0.5% of interest rate. Panama, 1.3%. Canada, 1.7%. Let's go all the way to Peru, 2.5%, right? Keep in mind those numbers. Paraguay, 4%. Now let's go to Africa. Let's go to Liberia and see how much someone will have to borrow in order to do business. So we'll go to Africa and we'll go to Liberia, for instance. Let's go all the way down to Liberia, Sierra Leone, Liberia, and I'll show Edward is on the line. So let's go to Liberia. We're paying 12%. If I want to open a mining company, where will I go? Will I go to Peru, Singapore, where I can borrow money for 1%, 2%, or will I go to Liberia, where it costs me almost what, 12%? Not only that, inflation now, 29%. This is current data today. So these are some of the problems. And somebody who doesn't understand these numbers, somebody who have never been exposed to this number, they would think that building the economy will just be about praying. So they will have a tirade, they will go to church and they will say, God help us. But there's no God in this one. God never created economics. He created everything, but he cannot create economics. Man created economics. Man created money. So if you want to understand money, if you want to prosper financially or as a nation, you need to understand the number. If you go to where Mr. Jackson was saying, let's go to those countries, Norway and Finland, all these countries. So we go to Europe and see why European companies, or let's go to Australia, why Australian company can come to Liberia and be able to give the government $5 million because they're paying only less than 1% interest rate. So what they do, they go to the local banks in Australia, they borrow $1 billion, they're only paying what? 0.75%. They go to Liberia and they go and own a concession. So if they give Liberian government $100 million and the return on the iron ore is what? 80%, they make a fortune. And that's why our central bank needs to come out and say, if we want Liberians to be in power, then we need to first create corporations, because all these companies that I alluded to, every rich country in the world, what do they have? They have corporations. And those are the corporations that bring back wealth and bring back economic prosperity in lives.
Thank you, Mr. June. The only thing I don't agree with is you say God did not create economics. That's not true.
Okay, tell me. I don't speak with that. I don't speak with that economics. Not God. No way the Bible.
I think man's quest to satisfy his needs created economics. If it's something that was inherent in man, that it would economics will be created.
Create economics.
All right. Mr. Dehpue has just joined us. That's the Mr. Zuo. Welcome to Focus on Liberia. I know you are late, but good to have you.
Thank you very much. Sorry for coming late, but I've been following up for the past 20 minutes and I've been listening to Mr. Jackson and also Patrick Sua. I didn't know that he's around. So, and Alex. But thank you very much. One thing I want to say here is that I listened to Mr. Jackson initially when he was talking about economic plan and economic policy. But realistically, while it is true that I appreciate Ellis' own analysis of the Western economy, and I usually tell the Liberian politicians, even those who are policymakers, that my best role model in Africa is Paul Kagame. It's not about what he's doing, but he always say homegrown solution. With all of the things that we are talking about, the Western economy, with all the theories, the fact that there is that you look at yourself and say, how do I manage my life and how do I manage my wealth? So the economy should just be put in that scope and say, I'm a man, I need to marry a wife, I want to have 3 kids, I want to have, a degree, or my children will have this. First of all, you need to have that fundamental plan of where you are going. Until you do that as a country, it's very difficult. You might have enough resources, you might have iron ore, gold, the rest of it, until you have a plan and just put it together and say, this is what I have and this is where I'm going. Until you can do that, you cannot succeed as a country or as a family. Now, the next thing that I listen to other callers is that Liberia, yes, the issue of open door policy, I agree with Mr. Jackson, is something that was good. And I still believe that that's one of the best documents that the President Topman came up with. The real problem that we've been having in Liberia is the implementation of all of these good policy. The same open door policy you're talking about, it is the same policy that Singapore used today. If you do a research, that's what Singapore used today, they succeeded. You want to make sure that you open the market for external capital. You may not have all because you are indigenous and you have the land. You need resources, you need capital to actually produce. So you open the economy that other people are investing in. So instead of closing the economy, we need to open it up. But the first thing that you need to do as a country is to have a plan. And the economic policy plan will be a deliberate plan that country put together and say, what are we doing? Maybe a comprehensive plan that what we have now, like the Pro agenda. Even if you look at the agenda for transformation or PRS, these are all good papers that were put together. But the thing that there is that what are the prioritizations that have been done by the government? And who are those responsible for these sectors? How are they moving these things? Then the question comes, it's not all about just having an economic plan or having a good politics and having a good policy. Then the leadership issue comes in. Do you have the right leadership in place? And the question of leadership has to do with the vision. So plan must have a vision, and they must have an objective to achieve the vision. So Liberia as a country, we are still struggling because, one, we made a plan and we don't stick to the plan. Second thing that even with the good plan, we have not prioritized it to see what are the available resources we have. For example, I heard you people talking about Firestone. It's a good idea that Firestone came in, and in fact, so we are golden opportunity. 1926 at the time, Firestone came to Liberia. What we need to do now is already a done deal. But are Liberians actually aware of how Firestone production is right now? No. There's no information. The Ministry of Finance will tell you that this is the revenue generated, and central bank will say, okay, this is the deposit that we got from government. But we need to first of all know what are the financial performance of the multinational corporation. Do we really have information to the public that someone can buy shares in Firestone? Are Liberians able to buy shares in Firestone since they don't have the investment capital? What about the commercial banks? Are there policy on the books to say, okay, looking at this country now, we need to make sure local empowerment comes from what? Economic empowerment. All companies, corporations, international, multilateral corporations that come to Liberia, we are saying we can do a profit sharing scheme. You invest in Liberia, what we say, instead of you repatriating all the capital, you have to leave this amount in the country for reinvestment. These are plans that were actually part of the open door policy, and also President Toba's plan also captured that. Even President Dore came to power, he actually introduced that. Then you go back, what did we do next? In terms of implementation, it became a challenge for the country because the leaders and those in power could not really know which direction to take. So in my mind, we have mixed politics and economics in such a way that you have more political sensitivity without having, first of all, the basic knowledge of wealth or resource allocation and appropriation. You can become minister today, and even if you don't know how to do your daily schedule or how to tackle the issue in your sector, you become failure. And that goes to the entire country until you can come up with a plan, make sure you have a schedule on the implementation of the plan. You cannot succeed as a country. What are we doing today? Let's say agriculture, which I heard this previous speaker talk about growing economy. Yes.
Because hold your thought. I know you're late. So
He's a dual coming. He's trying to make up for lost start. So we gotta move on.
I'm sorry.
Let me bring in one of our regular callers, Mr. John Eastman. Mr. Jimmy Eastman. Eastman, welcome to Focus on.
Hey, Janice, how you doing? Good show again tonight.
Great.
Okay. I like what Mr. Jackson said, man. We even may be related somewhere back there, Mr. Jackson. But anyway, he talked about indigenous entrepreneurship. I like to modify that to indigenous production. Okay? If we consider what GDP is, which is a monetary measure of the final goods and services of the country. So we're looking at everything being produced. Our production has always been geared toward providing raw materials. But if we actually want to make, like Mr. Jackson alluded to, indigenous production, we have to concentrate and focus on the development of human capital. Okay, the two major determinants of human capital are education and health. And that is where we fare poorly. I'm not talking about university. I have nothing against higher education, but I'm talking about just vocational education. You see, Kwame Nkrumah got that a long time ago. So he focused on getting his population prepared educated so they can take on these industries. But without the building blocks, without the human capital to produce indigenously, how can you produce? You have to get them ready first, then they will produce, even if they don't have a job, even if you don't have an industry today. But if they are prepared to work in an industry, they will find a way to make a living. So teach a man how to fish, you feed him for life. And that is where the mistake has been. We have not invested. Tolbert got it a bit, but we have not. We need to invest in the development of human capital if we're going to turn this thing around. You can put any policy, you can put together any industry, but until people can produce, can create wealth on their own by their own hands and production, we'll always be in an impoverished state.
Thank you, Jimmy. Okay, before I go to my next caller and before I let you panelists come in, we want to go to our West African correspondent, Mr. Edward Amara, to give us the news rundown of what's happening back on the continent.
Thank you very much, though. Okay, I think I can get you clear now. Thank you very much. A lot of things are going on in West Africa currently. Yesterday, there was a news that emanated from Nigeria and Ghana, and it has a concomitant effect on what happened today. The University of Nigeria and Ghana, the lecturers have been accused of harassing the female students for sex in exchange for grades. And in Sierra Leone today, the Sierra Leone Football Association was suspended and fined $50,000 and ordered to play their next World Cup and Nation Cup qualifiers behind closed doors because of the incident that took place between Sierra Leone and Liberia when they played each other some few weeks ago, in which Sierra Leone lost 3-2 on goal aggregate. In Liberia, they are beating their 1-0. 2-1 in Sierra Leone here, they beat 1-0, but when you watch at the aggregates, Liberia has to progress because the aggregate was 3-2. Then in Burkina Faso, about 30 suspected terrorists were killed by the Burkina Faso army. These are people who have some affiliation with Boko Haram, and some of them have close link with Daesh and ISIL. Then in Mali, we have some trouble with the tribal rebels in the northern region of Mali. But the President Amadou Toumani Touré is claiming that they are trying to make some amount of progress in trying to see how to harmonize the peace. And we have some French peacekeepers who are actually in Mali, part of that northern region around Timbuktu, who are trying to amend the peace affairs over there. But though the tribal rebels are very troublesome and they know the terrain, they have been terrorizing people. And in the Cameroon, that is just somehow Central Africa, but very close to Nigeria, there is a kind of civil uprising between the English-speaking Cameroonians, that is the Francophone the Anglophone Cameroonians and the Francophone Cameroonians. We all know that Cameroon was one colonized part of where they are fighting today. It was colonized by Germany, but when it came to handling power during the time of the UN trusteeship countries, we are now trying to hand over power. By then, Cameroon, Nigeria, we are trying to gain independence. So they took the English-speaking Cameroon side, that is the Anglophone Cameroon, and hand over it to the Francophone Cameroonian, because around the 23 million people of Cameroon that we have, around 14% of those people in the Central African country, they make up the population of Cameroon. Since they are so minute in number and they may not be able to constitute a country on their own, so UN by then took it to Cameroon, but now they are trying to gain some amount of independence, and there is that political rivalry between the two. These are some of the major news into West Africa that is actually going on.
Thank you so much to Mr. Edward Amara. That is our West African correspondent. We appreciate your time and thank you so much. And have a good night right there in Freetown.
Thank you.
Mr. Dennis, I got to take a crack at my man, Mr. Zoll, with the appropriate agenda. If that's okay with you.
No, I want you to take notes. Let me bring in 3 more callers who will be very quick. Just jot down the notes, and we're going to go. Let me get my callers on the line. They've been waiting for so long. Okay, a caller, your name and where you calling from?
My name is George Campbell. I'm calling from Houston, Texas.
George, welcome to Focus on Liberia. Your question or comment?
Yeah, thank you so much for taking my call. My comment, I'll make a comment first before I can give you a question.
Okay.
We're talking about failed state Liberia. I know Mr. Jackson, Samuel Jackson. He was our man in the 1980s. He was the younger boy among the PRC government. People started asking, where the other boy coming from? How the labor doing that over there? And you have to say, yeah, Jackson is older guy now. With all the education, Jackson is a great guy. He worked for international company, and all of the government from Samuel Doe to today, Joya, Jackson has worked in the government. He has given, I don't know, I can't use the numerous times that he has been there. And Liberia province stays the same. I'm so, Mr. Jackson, I'm not trying to talk down on you. But what I'm trying to say here is that you and I know, from 1980 up to today, the problem for Liberia, when you left the PRC government, you know what happened. I don't want to go there.
That's the comment, your question.
Why so that? When that we say every government that comes, the IO pray going, the rubber pray going, and what the things happen. Why is it you're never turning the thing around? With all the, when you sit down on your podcast, you explain all of the economic trade, this and that. Why you never change the situation until today? If I see you on a program like this, you say like real fail, I will hold you responsible. Why you never change it? Why?
Thank you, Josh. Mr. Jackson, please take note. Let me go to my next caller. Caller, your name and where you calling from? Caller, your name and where you calling from? All right, let me
913. Okay. Dr. Boto calling from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Your name again, please?
My name is Dr. Boto, calling from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Dr. Boto, welcome to Focus on Liberia. Your question or comment?
Okay. First of all, I would want to make a statement regarding some of the explanation that the guests made on the show.
Okay.
I think our problem as a country has to do with insincerity. We are not sincere to ourselves. I will not go far. I will start with Sally. When Sally was in power, she kind of brought in some kind of policy that every year there is a county development fund that is allocated in the budget. If we as a people will implement or ensure that the county development fund is used wisely every year, I think the country will move forward. Like for instance, my county, for instance, Grand Gilead received about 500,000 every year, a population of 200,000. So if Grand Gilead is implementing that, making sure that that budget or the amount is used wisely for developmental purposes, for the past 12 years, that would have been $6 million in the midst of almost 250,000 people who will have moved forward by this time. But because of corruption, it brings us back to corruption again.
Okay.
And then my second take would be we have to learn from our neighbors. Ivory Coast in the 90s was experiencing the same thing. And what did they do? They ensure that their economic kind of wake up from the agricultural sector. The president you see today he brought in a policy, and that policy worked, where they massively produce cash crops, like their cocoa, pineapple, pepper, you name them all, massively for the West African market, and then exported on the world market. So we have to encourage ourselves to go into the agriculture sector. Without agriculture, we cannot do anything. And we should ensure that what we eat what we produce. I was kind of disappointed with my own government, but I don't want to go into it. Okay. When they cut tariffs on chicken feed. Imagine, why will you cut tariffs on chicken feed if you can empower the farmers to produce chicken massively?
Yeah.
To buy incubators these days is cheap. And they can produce chicken feed. They produce chicken and put on the market. So the highest supply of chicken on the market will indirectly bring the prices down. That goes with the people as well. So that's my take. Anyway, thank you for having me and giving me this time to speak on your show.
Thank you so much, Dr. Boto. Now let me go to my last caller if you are still there. Caller, your name and where you calling from?
Yes, hello. This is William King. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. William, welcome to Focus on Liberia. Your question or comment?
Yes, thank you very much. I've been listening to Alex Chuchu Jones, Dehpue, and Samuel P. Jackson, and Edward. Thank you guys very much. Here's my comment. Y'all, please, we got to talk more. I can't say everything on this call, but please, after I'm done, y'all will find what I have to say very interesting. Long story short, we as Liberians, we have the economic power and the economic will in us to basically create a investment fund, an equity fund. We can pool the resources together. It can be established on the SEC, the United States of America SEC private equity fund market. So we govern by rules and regulation. We can raise maybe $500 million. $500 million. Now we are in the driving seat. Now we can take that amount of capital as Liberians, go to our government, engage in a collaborative discussion where that money basically act as a business, and we can invest in things like agriculture, electricity, real estate, and different things. With that kind of capital, we can create different systems working with government, not waiting with the government. Like I said, not waiting on the government. A lot of the solutions we have is to wait on the government, thinking that the government has in it the ability to do that. No, we can do it. There's the insurance sector. We can make some good return on our money like that. So I just want to say that is something that is not new. That is something that in the United States of America, they do. When we look at the loan market, loans, you have to repay the interest. From a certain point in time, you have to continue to pay. But when you have the equity fund, it's a capital investment that we can pull from Liberians, both in the diaspora and in Liberia also. There's a way that can be set up. This is not my say. This is SEC regulations. So that is what I just want to say to Alex Chuchu Jones, Dehpue, and Professor Samuel P. Jackson, William King here. Let's connect offline if we can, so we can critique and kind of fine-tune this plan. It's not cheap, but it's very doable because we as Liberians, we send to Liberia, on average, every year, we send about maybe $300 to $400 million. And nobody should tell me about the fear of losing money in Liberia, because no matter how much we criticize Liberia, up to this day, we still sending money back home for all of us. We send money for school, for this, for that. So we're still sending money back home. And we cannot ask foreigners and different people to put money in, and then we don't want to put money in because we have to have skin on the game. Now, some of the things that I'm saying is not just from me. There are many people on this call that have expressed little bits and pieces and everything like that. But I think there's a way we can put it together so we can mobilize. But we can start from getting regulated on the SEC USA market. That's who's going to regulate us. So Liberian people don't have to fear, because you know the capital markets in the U.S., you do something stupid, there's a financial prison for you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. King. Now, let's go around the table, starting with Alex, then Mr. Jackson, and then Dehpue. Your response to all what the callers
very
have.
good question, and I think the brother who just spoke is actually right. Liberia needs a sovereign wealth fund. We need to invest some of our resources. We need to also collaborate to raise capital outside of the country, and I think Mr. Jackson mentioned that earlier. So, but basically, Mr. Zwo, where I have an issue with the poverty reduction strategy or the pro-poor agenda, it's not working. If you read the strategy, it's nothing but platitude. What we're gonna do, we're nice, and how we're gonna invest in poor people. There's no how. Again, like I said, you cannot invest with interest rates of almost 15%. What is the government doing in a poor or and I'm not gonna just take shot at this government, because I think the opposition are worse than this government. If you put, because I've never heard them make any economic sense. They've never had a press conference from the Darius DeLong, and I hope he comes on this show, to the Benina Ure, to the Alex Cummings. They've never made one economic sense on how should they be president of a government. So let me just be fair and balanced here. But back to the pro-poor agenda, it's a worthless policy. It's just platitude. And I think when you try something, it's not working, it's important you change it. It's important you revise it. And to just stick with it, your economy was downgraded, unemployment is still high, there's no investment into the country, your currency, why are you still sticking with that policy? It's time that they rewrite a new policy, maybe call it pro-middle class, agenda. Because why would somebody want to be pro-poor? You want to get people from poverty to wealth, not to indulge in, stay poor, live in a village, and we'll give you chicken and we'll give you a free breakfast rice. So that's one thing I'm totally against. I think you guys who are consulting and you guys who you smart guys, but you need to rewrite our policy. You need to write it where Liberia owns industry. And a very simple thing, like the brother just said, we need to come together. Most times in Liberia, when you find politics or you find Liberian educated, they don't collaborate. I think this is the first time you find Liberians with all different views, political views, philosophies, and we can talk. You can disagree with me. Me and Mr. Jackson were on it last week, but what happened? We're discussing. So we need to encourage more people to come and see if fit to try to reason together. Because once we start reasoning together, in America, we play golf on Saturday, and on Monday we go after each other banks and we go after each other companies and so forth. And the next week we go play golf or tennis. So we need to come together, like the brother said, and set up a fund. And then you guys who can reach out to the different parties and the stakeholders and the politicians, they need to get involved. They need to start talking. You're not going to win election. And one last point. People think that by having a dual citizenship, you're just going to leave from Liberia now because you have a master's degree and you're going to jump to Liberia and get a position. Those days are over. Okay? You're not going to get any position or win any election. Alexander Comey, I think, spent millions of dollars to win election. How did he do? People are looking for solutions. They're looking for ideas. The ideas that we're going to go to Britain and America to give us money, foreign investment, foreign direct. Those days, I mean, that's just a song. It's not going to happen. No country in the world is going to give any other country any money.
Okay.
So we need to invest in ourselves. We need to come together, and we need to build our country. And then I also think, Mr. Jackson, you need to be more involved in your country. You need to, as do I am, I should be more involved. I mean, why am I here? Why can I contribute? All of us, we need to take our country at heart and play more role. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let me go to you, Mr. Jackson. Besides the rest of the callers, one of them actually went to you, say you've been around and basically you've not done much to make a change.
Okay, but first of all, I don't want to get personal.
Mm-hmm.
But when the people talk, they typically talk out of ignorance. And I don't want to go into my own life history, but that when you talk about me being around, in 1980, I was deputy minister for 11 months in the Samuel Doe government from April to February, April of 1980 to February of 1981. That's 11 months. And then I worked for Charles Taylor for 2 years, 2002 to 2003. That's it. And for Ellen, I was what are you going to do? Consulting for 6 months. So just because I'm vocal, because I seem like omnipresent, they kind of confuse my political position, like with this intimate relationship with the governments. And you can check the record of Dennis. 11 months with Doe, less than 16, 17 months with Charles Taylor. I got a job with Charles Taylor. He asked me to help him with the effects of sanction in 2002 February. But in by 2003 August, Charles Taylor was out of the country, And since 2003, I've been working as a consultant, a global consultant. Only 6 months, Ellen asked me to go help Amra at the Ministry of Finance, from January of 2014 to June of 2014. That's the sum of my association with government, period. End of conversation, So, the ignorance is very, 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 very biting. And because somebody is very vocal, somebody will take position, you've been working with this government. So you want to tell me working for government for less than 3 years, I will have such an impact? And all of the time I've worked for the government, except for the Ellen Sirleaf government, I was not even working for her, is that there was a period of crisis. 1980 to 1981 was a period of great crisis. 2002 to 2003 was a period of great crisis. There was a war going on in Liberia in 2002. In fact, when I started the job in 2002, Lord had already hit Bombay Hills and they controlled Tubmanburg. So you were not talking about a functioning dynamic economy. You're talking about a war economy and a war footing. Okay? Since 2003 to the current time now.
Understood.
Let me finish there. I think it's important for you to understand. I've been a consultant, and I've done most of my work with UNDP, USAID, the World Bank, and other major companies doing social impact studies. Mm-hmm. So let's just go beyond that, right, with the like the personality, always attacking people. Look, let's go to the fundamental problem that we have in Liberia. The fundamental problem we have in Liberia is ownership and productivity. Let me explain that to you. We own nothing in our country. When Alex was putting up those companies like Fortescue and BHP Billiton and all of those are companies that are owned by the nationals of those countries. Vale is owned by Brazilians. Lamco wasn't owned by Liberians. Bongman wasn't owned by Liberians. Firestone's not owned by Liberians. So Sim Dhabi is not owned by Liberians. Kavala is not owned by Liberians. So, where in the world would you see large corporations existing and making money in the country where the citizens of the country do not ride the growth curve? They are there for prosperity, a shared prosperity, where you have to have ownership. Liberian economic empowerment must consist of ownership. In Ghana, Ashanti Goldfields, my grandfather was a Ghanaian. My cousins, they own shares in Ashanti Goldfields. They own shares in Ghanaian corporations that are global. In Nigeria, UBA Bank, GT Bank, all of these banks, The global banks, they're owned by Nigerians. South Africa, a friend of mine, Patrice Giuseppe, Harmony Gold. Okay, he's a billionaire. Liberians own nothing. Liberians produce nothing. The fundamental issue is productivity and ownership. And let's get down to something as simple as who owns the jobs in the country. When you start bringing Filipinos and Lebanese store boys, go to Royal Hotel. Who's selling the pastry over there? A Filipino. Who making the sushi? Filipinos. Who at the front desk? Filipinos. Go to all of the auto repair shops, all of the automobile, auto parts store around the street. You have Indians and the Lebanese. I went to buy a keke about 4 or 5 weeks ago in Liberia. The guy who was writing the receipt for me is an Indian guy. The woman who was counting the money is an Indian woman, right? A country cannot grow, a country cannot move if it does not indigenize economic opportunity for its people. In Ghana, the country of my ancestry, my grandfather, when you cannot do any trading, selling wholesale, retail in Ghana as a foreigner, unless you invest 300,000 United States dollars and employ 10 Ghanaians. When you go to the mall, West Hills Mall or Accra Mall, look at the stores. Who's in ShopRite? You don't see any Lebanese in ShopRite. Go to McCullough Market. You don't see any Lebanese or Indians in McCullough Market. Go to Kakushi Market. You don't see Lebanese, Indians, or Fulas in those markets. You see indigenous Ghanaians.
Right. So Mr. Jackson, that's the problem. What do we do? And when you say we should indigenize, how you call that word again?
Indigenized.
Right. How do we do it? That's the question. And
okay. But because let me tell you something. Every country that has indigenized economic opportunities for its people have had a closed economy initially. And it's only when the people reach a certain level is when they open up the economy.
Right. So let's say today we want to indigenize the economy. How do we start today?
One of the first things I would do, I would give the Lebanese, the Indians, okay, and other foreigners, I would give them 5 years to get out of the wholesale and retail trade. No more wholesale. Yeah.
Well, I would disagree with Mr. Jackson. That's a horrible policy.
Hold on a second. Let me tell you how that works. Okay.
I wish I can come in quick.
Yeah, I think let's get somebody else. I think.
But you asked me how do I do it. I'm telling you how you do it, right?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson, use 1 minute so that Zuo can come in.
Well, I mean, you asked me how do I do it, and then you gave me 1 minute. I mean, I would completely cut all foreigners off from the wholesale and retail trade. 90% of what you consume in the country come from outside. You're using disposable income, which is a national wealth, to purchase imports. And those imports are sold to you by foreigners. They import, they wholesale, and they retail. They are at the value chain of the whole retail operation. They're there. You are not there. You don't produce anything. You don't sell anything. If you go to Claratown, Bushra Island, all of the large import houses over there, they're all Lebanese. Breachway, Kusa, A to Z, and all of those. And then the supermarkets, they own the supermarkets also.
But Mr. Jackson, that's the problem. And what's the solution, like you say? So you cut off the Lebanese.
I would give them 5 years. Okay. I would give them 5 years to go into manufacturing.
Okay, but Liberians don't have 5 years.
No, but hold on a second, because you have to phase it out. And let me tell you how you do that.
Okay.
In Ghana,
right.
You have bundle warehouses that are owned by banks. The banks finance the imports. They own the bundle warehouses. And the traders.
Yeah, but Mr. Jackson, that was exactly the point. You're not willing to run a bank in Liberia. Americana is not willing to run a bank in Liberia. everybody wants to be president, everybody wants to be senator, everybody wants to be legislator. How many people on this show to say, okay, put me over a bang in Liberia?
Let me give Mr. Zuo a chance to come in.
Mr. Zuo, would you like to run a bang in Liberia?
Thank you very much. I think personally, one thing I believe in is personal development lead to national development. And I appreciate Mr. Jackson admitting to the fact that he participated in he was official of government in some other government, even though it was crisis time. And he had been international consultant. And I think one of the things that also need to be happening there, as he's giving the practical solution of taking the Lebanese off the market, I would like for Mr. Jackson to be very frank to say, look, I started just say a financial literacy program in Soniwen in 1979 before the coup, and I did this, or when I was at Commerce, I was able to establish a community, credit union to actually give financial, security to the community resident so that the people will be conscious of how to even take care of their finances and other things. But let's just go straight to some of the major issues here. What is important here is that in as much as we outline all the challenges and the constraints in Liberia, the first caller that came in when he just mentioned about the human capacity component of the development. When you have people are educated, health and education being the priority and agriculture being added to that, you see people be very conscious of production and how to make decisions. Besides that, what is very much important here is that I mentioned leadership before you called me on, Mr. Jai. We still having leadership challenge in Liberia, and that problem need to be resolved. You overlook it. If you have people who take at a community level, honest people at a community level, even in schools, in hospitals, in all of these places, who are very accountable to their people, you see development plan and all of these things will take place. Liberians who are calling from here talking about setting a fund, it's a very good idea. Even as we speak right now, I know my brother Ellis was trying to challenge the pro-poor agenda. You will see there even some of the resource mobilization strategy that there is to have diaspora bond, which is very much important, even though you don't want to jump into that. But why if the Liberians here can actually invest in the capital market as recommended by our brother who just spoke earlier? These things are things that people do and repatriate the fund to their country. We're talking about Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, and the rest of the neighboring countries we're looking at it. One thing that's there is that these people try to indigenize the system, as Mr. Jackson is saying, but how many of us are willing to actually invest our time and say the business is going to start? And Mr. Jai, the how, that's one of it there. And the how is just written clearly in the PAPD you're talking about. The first thing that there is that business registration being prioritized and making sure that there was transparency in the registration process. And the next thing that there is that agriculture, which is the mainstay of the economy, making sure that you have extension services for farmers to understand, first of all, crop production, multiplication, multi-cropping, and rest of the thing should be done by extension service officer. How do you do it? Until people can have that knowledge and have the capacity to do it, it's difficult for the economy to pick up. Now, let me go to the main question that was raised by one of the callers. And the issue there was, how do we really change the dynamics? I can say here is the commitment to, first of all, see the bigger picture. Investment now, Liberians here can do capital pool. You don't need to close the Lebanese store and say, I'm closing it down. Let's be very practical. I will boastfully say, I'm sorry to say that I'm from Nimba. I got a relationship in Granchide. But look at Ganta. And reaching Ganta today, those of you who have been to Liberia and those who are in Liberia will tell you today that there is no Lebanese store in Ganta because the indigenous guys have taken over the store. If an Indian man opens a store, he knows that his goods will go unsold. There must be a challenge. People challenging the people and say, look, instead of us saying that we'll close the economy, we'll close it, or you're not going to come here, the best thing to do is to compete. And the modern economy is a competition. Why will you shy away from competition to close the economy when there's other goods and services that you will need from this country and from these people, and you don't have, in fact, the capital to invest, you don't have it. So the best thing to do is to have a capacity to train people, have educated people, and you have a business-minded people. In the first place, education cannot do all. You have people who invest. Look at the energy sector in Liberia. I mentioned that the last time. Who is doing the energy distribution right now in Liberia? The only Liberian that's in it right now is Flor Toma in Sanikwale, connecting Cote d'Ivoire power to Ghana, going towards Guangzhou. That's a Liberian. You don't need Lebanese to do that. And he can be challenged. Right? Any Lebanese, the only thing that there should be a policy that will protect Mr. Flor Toma income and say, look, we give you certain incentive for employing more Liberians, and therefore you'll be giving this incentive. These are some of the things that are already written. In fact, Mr. Jackson is aware that the Toba plan, actually they have 22 businesses set aside for Liberian-owned businesses that was set aside, and obviously as a what? Liberalization policy to protect Liberians. Up to 2010, the Dehpue and the rest of the people felt that, look, why is it that you have 22 businesses that are supposed to be owned and operated by Liberians, and you only see the Lebanese, the foreigners in there, and Liberians are not there? What's the essence of having that law on the books? You need to repeal it and then reduce it from 22 to 11. Even the 11, how many Liberians are going into that? So we need to now challenge ourselves as citizens and say, look, I need to be practical. Even professors that are in this country, we need to say, look, Liberians that are teaching at various universities in America, how do they partner with the University of Liberia or community colleges that are over there to ensure that they are imparting knowledge, they're also sharing experience, doing a sabbatical, going and sharing experience there. This is the only way that we can help and grow the economy. And that's something that are practical. And the propos, now let me go to Alex's question. The policy, the crafting of the document, obviously, I tell you, say, there are so many things. At the back of the document, you see result metrics that look at various policy issues and the objective that there, and the proposed solution to that. You will see that clearly. What is very much important is the implementation side. What are the resource requirements? We don't have the resources. Can you now open the country, open dialogue with donor partners to see how best you can do resource mobilization? That's the thing the government need to do presently to make sure that the plan is implemented. So
I just want to respond to that.
You had enough time, so I
haven't spoken yet. You and Jackson, Mr. Jackson spoken. You went up for 5 minutes.
You were the first to speak, and we're about to wind down. We have gone almost 2 hours, so we are we're going to close on that note. But it's very important because our attitude towards government these days, maybe it's not because we don't like government, but we've been in successive administration have abused the Liberian people, to put it mildly. So maybe that's one reason we look at government differently. But I want to have an opportunity to discuss that propos agenda. You know, if you know a little bit more about it, that we set aside one of these shows so as to go into it. It could be a very good document, but because of this antipathy towards government, so nobody even want to read about it. It's time to say propos is like you want to toss it out.
Yes, I don't have problem with that. But what I want to say here is
I would toss it out.
Indigenous businesses. I want to stress that before you close up. Right now, one of the things that you see in Liberia right now is that, you know, it is also dishonesty, corruption. The country, our problem is corruption, dishonesty that is endemic in the society. You see, most of the businesses that you see there, the Lebanese and the Indians you see, they are fronting for Liberians. Liberians, we go, some of the businesses are raised in Liberians' name, but they are no longer anywhere around to account for that, or it's owned by a foreigner. So how do you, first of all, are there rules on the books to penalize people for such things? What do we do? And something needs to make sure that we discourage corruption in the country. It will be difficult. The sources talking about Ghana.
I need to respond to Mr. Zoe. He made some scurrilous charge against me, and I need to respond to that. He said that
you can give me a minute. You can give me a minute. I'd like to get a response from him.
But you guys go on for 5 minutes. Gotta keep it 2 minutes.
I did not open a credit union. Okay?
I didn't say so. I
You
said,
said that. You
no,
said
I didn't say so.
that.
I said to particle
have-
last, Mr. Jackson, listen. I said to particle last, what are you talking about?
Listen to me. Why must you make it personal?
Yes.
The only obligation I have to my country is to pay taxes, is to raise my family, and to be a very good citizen. End of conversation. But let me give you some facts. Hold on a second. Just be quiet for a second, okay? So
at the same time, you have a responsibility to invest in your economy.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Do you know how many businesses I've had in Liberia? Do you know I had the biggest ice making factory in Liberia from 2000 in Pinsville, Joba, from 2004 until I got sick in 2015. Are you aware of that?
Those are
yes or no? Yes or no? Are you aware of that? Are you aware of that?
You did not let the audience and the public to know that, look, we can particularize the indigenization by investing in ourselves.
I employed 15 people and 100 retailers.
Mr. Jackson.
Let me finish. I think it's important.
Mr. Jackson, hold on.
Okay.
Mr. Jackson.
I also own a bakery. I also own a bakery in Chocolate City. That is also
yeah, Mr. Jackson. Yes.
Well, why you didn't answer the how question?
Hold on.
No, but because you see, the thing is, when you make it personal, it's like, why you didn't do this? Why you didn't do that? That's the whole history of Liberia.
But see, Mr. Jackson, in fairness, Mr. Jackson,
Mr. Jackson came out to clarify that.
Let me just throw some light on it, Mr. Jackson.
Hold on, everybody, hold on. All right. Hold on, Mr. Jackson. You've been muted. Just hold on. What is happening here is, all he said was, to make it practical, Mr. Jackson needs to show me what he did at XYZ point.
Exactly.
So just go ahead and stay where you did.
Exactly. So
be exercised about that.
I will tell you, I had an ice factory. I employed 15 people and responsible for 100 retailers for more than 10 years. I also own a bakery, in Chocolate City. I own a dollar store and a restaurant on Kerry Street, okay? In 1979, I had a beauty supply store on Gurley Street. I'm an entrepreneur through and through. You don't even know that. You don't even know I was second vice president of a bank in America in 1978.
Let me just say this. Mr. Jackson, and thanks for the comment. And let me just say this. And I appreciate the fact that we can sit down and talk about it, because Mr. Jackson, part of the reason people have this stereotype of people like you who have served your country, who's gone back, is because there is no medium by which people can come out and discuss who they are and what they've really done. In America, people write memoirs, they go on CNBC, they go on Bloomberg, so people know them. Unfortunately, with us, we don't have any media. So it's a good thing, because I don't think that if somebody wants to know about me, ask me questions. I'm here to answer those questions. I'm not here to say, because you asked me a certain question or policy or something, call me and ask the question on the show. So it's a good thing.
I'm also an author of a book.
And I was just about to go into that.
That I've written.
All right.
Okay. You done very well, Mr. Jackson.
Mr. Jack, can you give me 1 minute to respond, Mr. Jackson?
Yeah, we're almost out of time.
No, but this is something that I have done. This is a 542.
But that's why I promote your point instead of going back to him.
Mr. Jackson, you have made that.
I have several businesses in Liberia.
That's
Jackson. Mr. Jackson.
All right. Okay.
All right.
We're gonna whatever you have to say now. We're gonna wrap it up in your final and closing statement. There's a healthy discussion. You know, we are asking. We want to the how is the one we all struggle with. We have restated the problem in so many ways. Now we came to the how. So I don't think Mr. Zuo's statement was personal. It was just
very personal. It was very personal.
All right.
It was not personal.
Mr. Jackson.
Mention somebody.
Right. I think we can go to closing.
Okay. So
that person has done. You know, That has nothing to do with the conversation. That's a personal attack. He did that deliberately because he's ignorant. He doesn't know nothing about me.
No, Mr. Jackson.
Okay, I think we should go to closing.
All right, let's go to our closing remarks.
All right.
And,
I think I'm going to diffuse the situation. First of all, Mr. Zuo, your pro policy is wrong. It's not working. It's been around for 18 months. Liberians are more poor than when you started. It needs to be changed. You need to have a more comprehensive policy, well studied, that will lift Liberian people up. Mr. Jackson, I disagree with you on the fact that, yeah, you may have a lot of personal successes. You've written a book, which is good. And I've begun reading your books. In fact, I purchased your book and I encourage all Liberians to buy a book. But individual success is not enough to build a country. We need collective success. We talk about businesses. You had an ice factory. We need corporation. All the listing of the companies and the countries that we listed, whether it's Rio Tinto or is Metal Steel, those are corporations. They're not one-person businesses. And unfortunately, Mr. Dehpue's pro-poor agreement doesn't talk a word about setting up Liberian corporation. It doesn't talk a word about getting Liberians' banks into Liberian hands. And how can you build an economy when you don't even own your banks? We're talking about the Lebanese people. We're talking about the Indian people. These people go, or the Nigerians or the Ghanaians, they go to their country, they get low interest loan, they come to Liberia, they make a profit, they take that, they expatriate their returns. None of Liberians today are willing to say, all right, let's go and set up a manufacturing. Let's go and set up a companies. All right, let's go and set up a bank. Nobody's talking about that. Everybody wants to be president. Everybody wants to be senator. Everybody wants to be representative. Even if you did management in school, you want to be a senator. And that's the Liberian problem.
Even
the people who are supposed to be managing the industry, the people who are supposed to be managing the banks, what they're doing, they're campaigning. So until we change that and we start to focus on our industries and start to bring the smartest people like Mr. Jackson and Mr. Zuo to say, forget about, just the political theater and focus now on establishing sovereign wealth fund, stock market, corporation, manufacturing, bicycle company. Until we can do that, Liberia is going to continue to go downhill. So I hope this is a clearing call to forget about politics and focus on economics to make our country better.
Louis, do I disagree with your opinion on the PAPD? Have you read it, Alex?
No, I have not.
Right, but then you are criticizing it, and you say you have not read it.
I've heard it. I haven't read all of it, but I've heard what the policy is.
All right.
Interestingly, Mr.
Zuo, your final comments.
Thank you very much. I have actually avoided responding to Alex regarding to this PAPD, the fact that he's criticizing the document, he had not read it. I won't be in a position to respond to him until he can read the document. Because you will see financial inclusion and services clearly articulated in there. So there's no need for me to actually discuss that issue. And the next thing I want to say here is that I want for us to be very practical with the how issue of how do we develop Liberian indigenous businesses. One of the major things that there is that we need to have public awareness and education on some of the policy that are already written on the books. Interestingly, our people have not understood some of these things. The first thing that there is that major corporations operating in the country, Liberians don't know that they can buy shares. Even the banks that are there, if you look at realistically, even the mobile companies that are operating there, they sell shares, but no one, the public is not aware. The next thing that there is that in terms of domestic production, we need to see to help our Liberians. In fact, I have a colleague right now, he has a huge poultry, and now poultry farm, he's producing chicken eggs and having difficulties to access the market. How do we really help the Liberians to ensure that what is produced locally is actually what bought locally? We need to actually produce what we eat. and eat what we can produce. That's some of the practical things that we need to be doing. And another thing that we have to be looking at there is that how do we prepare the human capital? I will go back to that issue. In a sense that we discussed it, my first time appearing here is that our educational system to be more responsive to the demand in the economy. How do we prepare people to ensure that, let's say, I'm sorry, Mr. Jackson took exception to that, but if you have ice cream shop that is owned by Yvonne, you'll see more Liberians are actually into the business. Now, immediately you see a Lebanese coming into the market. What do you do to ensure that Sharks does not break down as a result of what? An ice cream shop that has been set up by Lebanese. And the law says clearly that they are not supposed to own it. Yes, it's written in the law. They're not supposed to own that. They are foreigner. They are supposed to leave ice cream shop, water, retail businesses. They are not supposed to go into that. So it's something that the public awareness is supposed to be done. So the public policy makers themselves, we are not informing our people. So next time when we come here, maybe what I can do is to download some of these policy and just read some and let our people be informed. It's the same thing the last time during the, I mentioned here, even our National Investment Commission.
Mr. Zua, what's the that of reading that if it is collecting dust somewhere or it is not really not being implemented the way it should?
Then the citizens hold their leaders accountable.
Good point.
If you own a business, no, listen to me, it's clear. If you own a business and you see to it that in fact there are other people who fraud the market, what the Lebanese actually usually do is that if they see to it that there's a Liberians in the business and this guy had started importing, for example, Henneken beer, they go somewhere and actually got a huge stock and come and fraud the market, put the guy out of the business. So the
it's a double. If it's not working, there's no point. If Liberians are poor, the poor general Liberia. How many Liberians?
No, I don't want development you to keep index. On the pro
what I'm saying is this. If you say you came up with a policy and the policy, yeah, I agree. But you came up with a solution.
2018, and I will tell you.
But you came up with a solution. The solution is not working.
The challenge that we are faced with today is didn't start in 2018.
But then what I'm saying,
in 1847.
Then find a solution. Right, they find a solution that will address 1847. But if you come up with a policy, the policy is not working. Well, hold on. Like somebody said, I didn't read it.
Mr. Jackson, no. For you, I do not want to debate with you on pro.
We're not debating.
You have knowledge of it.
I have knowledge of it. It's been publicized. I have knowledge of it. When we see here,
so I cannot discuss that issue.
Hold on. Let me go to Mr. Jackson for his final statements.
First of all, there was a good debate. I mean, the only thing I will keep talking about is when you personalize a conversation, when you say, what have you done? That's not the issue here. We're trying to find solutions to the problem. We're not trying to place blame. And I always say, I can only do one thing: pay my taxes, be a good father, take care of my children, and obey the laws of the country. That's all I'm required to do. Okay. Now, there's no way that you can develop a country, indigenize ownership without some kind of restrictions on foreign direct investments. There's no country on the planet that has not restricted entry into their market, small cap industries. In the United States, for example, I cannot own a newspaper and I cannot own a TV station because I'm a foreigner. In Mexico City, I cannot drive a taxi. In Botswana, I can't open up a tailor shop. In Ghana, I can't open up a retail store. So there has to be some restrictions. And the whole infant industry argument, countries that have developed and have made wealth for their people, they started off in small cap industries, shopkeepers and as farmers, and they made the economic transformation. Liberia wants to leapfrog. You cannot grow a country without having rich farmers. In Ghana, you have rich cocoa farmers and rich coffee farmers. In Liberia, you don't have any rich cocoa or coffee farmers. In terms of palm, the smallholder farms, in terms of palm production, is mostly non-existent. The only rubber farms that are making money are those ones that are 1,000 acres or 500 acres. In Malaysia, in Indonesia, and in India, anybody that owns a 100-acre rubber farm is a millionaire. You know why? Because their value addition to the rubber, they process the rubber, they do smoke sheets, and then they do other rubber products associated with that.
Mr. Jackson, we addressed that in the proper agenda that had to do with, you know, agro farmers and everything all outlined in there. Unfortunately, the implementation where the problem is.
Yeah, but y'all came over plan, y'all gotta implement it. You can't expect somebody else to implement your plan.
The proper agenda on our next.
I'm looking forward to it.
Mr. Jackson, please conclude. You have 30 more seconds.
No, I'm done. I just wanted Zool and others not to attack me.
Didn't attack you, Mr. Jackson.
With my life. You know,
it's an illustration.
You have nothing to do with my life.
That's okay.
It's an illustration. It's an illustration.
My wife is extremely happy.
That personal development. Personal development start with personal development.
All right.
My wife is extremely happy with me. My children are extremely happy with me. And my friends are extremely happy with me. Those are the only responsibilities I have in the world. I don't have any other responsibility.
Amen. I agree.
All right. So in all your closing statement, you're
interested that
because you're arguing.
Well,
all right. I want to appreciate you, gentlemen, for the spirited discussion. We want to thank our viewers on Facebook. We want to thank our callers, even though we're not able to even read your comments on Facebook. But we do appreciate you. Or if you have time, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Zhu, and Mr. Jones, please go on Facebook and respond to some of those questions. There are certain things that you say that our audience, some of them did not agree with. So if you have time, please respond to them. This is if the politicians are listening, if our political leaders and everybody else, they are listening, we are inviting you to come on the economic forum. Let's discuss economics, because there is an economic for everything. And as long as we don't look at that, and we are looking either at the political side or at the entertainment side or the fun side, we are not going to go far enough. There's an economic for everything. And so we need to recognize that. And we as citizens, we need to demand economic policies, economic plans, how they intend to grow the government from our would-be leaders. We don't want to wait until they get in power and then we start asking. When we vote for someone, we are, that we are engaging in a contract that, hey, do this for me, I'll give you your vote. But if we are not asking for anything, economic-wise, when they get in power, we should stop crying about, economic growth, because we did not make that a prerequisite to giving them our vote. So let us start to have these economic discussions that even if you want to marry, there's an economics of it. If you can afford it, you can't. If you can quantify anything, you can put numbers to things, there's no way you can analyze it. Even God knew that numbers are so important that he devoted one book in the Bible to just numbers. But we're not talking numbers anytime we talk Liberia, it's all raw politics. So anybody who has mouth to talk, you are an expert. And you start to talk without talking about the underlying problem, which is the economy. There is no country that is great because they know how to be politician or because they know how to talk. It's all about the economy. Even military-wise, you don't even need to have a military to be a great country. It's all about the moolah, the money. So I want to thank you guys. I don't know what's coming next, but we want to discuss the pro
agenda.
Yeah, we want to discuss the pro agenda. And we want our Minister Tue or anybody else from government to join us.
Actually, we don't want it because they can't handle this. So they can stay away.
We want all the political leaders. We want Mr. Bwaka, Mr. Cummings, Mr. Uri, and all the other politicians come and discuss.
They're not gonna come. They can't handle it. They don't know economics.
They won't handle it. So,
okay, they let them come.
Yeah.
But they can't come.
But I want to
Mr. Jackson, thank you for coming. I appreciate it. Very great paper, and I'm looking forward to reading your book, sir. Mr. Zoe.
Jackson, thank you very much, and good seeing you again after about, I think, about 4 years. How many years? How you doing?
Okay, take care, guys. Bye bye.
All right.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
guys.
All right. Bye bye.